Good evening, everyone. It's a big honor for us to have you, Joanna, here in our country, and especially to have the chance to talk with you about curatorial matters. Um, well, of course, as was already mentioned, she has a very extended trajectory, and she's a curator that focuses especially on visual art and performing art, architecture as well. We won't have the enough time to talk about all the things that we wish. So we will try to organize a talk in three big themes that will somehow give us the chance to unfold all the basically the main concepts in relation with contemporary art curatorial matters. Welcome, Joanna. Well, I think it will be interesting to start with this. Well, Joanna, I think I forgot to mention, but she leads the curatorial program from Curator Lab at Kunstfack University of Arts at Stockholm, Sweden. And as a matter of fact, it's possible, and we have this evening two publications that were edited by Curator Lab, and one of that one, it's Curating Beyond the Mainstream. Could you tell us about what is, in general guidelines, what is this book about?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really enjoying my time in Uruguay. I would have not expected to be invited here, but Laura and me met in New York in Laura Bardier in October, and then this invitation came. So it's a true pleasure, and I have met so many interesting people and artists, and really, it's like recharging batteries to be here. So thank you for having me. And it's true. I'm running this curatorial. So I'm from Warsaw in Poland. I live in Berlin, but I'm running a curatorial program in Sweden. So here you are saying something that we never say in Europe. You say somebody is a European. You know, in Europe we never say we are Europeans. In Europe you always say I'm from England or I'm from Poland. But actually I'm trying to be a European and try working in different countries of Europe. So I'm glad to be here as a European. And as a European, together with my students, last year, no, during the pandemic, we edited this book, which is called Curating Beyond the Mainstream, which is a portraits of 4 curators in Sweden, which are, they are not really recognized, but they were doing critical, important work in the 80s and 90s before actually people called themselves curators. And actually one of them is Carlos Capellan. So when I was coming, who lives since the 70s in Sweden, among other places. So when I was coming here to Uruguay, I realized that actually our book is also about Uruguayan artists. So there was this link with Capellan and with his philosophy. So if you ask me what is curating beyond mainstream for him, is, for example, something that he says about his relationship between an artist and curator, because of course in the art world there is more and more like power relations between artist and curator. And he says that in his case, it's not that as an artist he's a soft curator, and as a soft curator it's not doesn't mean that he has to curate only friends, because often artists who curate start to curate friends only. So he says, no, I don't have to curate only friends, I don't have to be friends with people I curate, but I need to trust their intentions. So this notion of trust, of trusting who you work with and what this person actually is going to deliver. It's a little bit like sometimes almost psychoanalytic relation, that actually there is somebody who has some urgency to deliver, and you as a curator are there to help this process, to go forward. So I would like to pass around this book so you can have a look at this research. And there is also a sister publication called Assuming Asymmetries, where also there is one of the project of Capellan, but not only. But basically this one is about, they are both available for free on the website. You can, if you Google the title, you can download them. And this one is about other important aspect of curating, which is that when we speak about participation and socially engaged projects, often they look very good on pictures. When you take a picture of a workshop, or it looks very good, but very often it's complicated and there are many hurt feelings, and it's very hard to conduct it in ethical manner. So this book is looking a little bit at, you know, examples of failed and healthy relationships between artists and curators and communities. So also I will pass it around, and please at the end bring it back to here because it's a present for Laura.
Joanna, you were saying that 4 curators were selected because they do share a specific type of practice in their curator field that somehow resonates with the methodology that it's taught in this at Curator Lab. Could you tell us a little bit about this methodology?
So Curator Lab is a program for young curators, but people who are already working and want a little bit to go further. And I was thinking in this program how to go beyond something which is a bit a danger of curating today, I think, which is falling in love with yourselves. You know, that certain curators are becoming, we know that, you know, this a little bit too busy to meet artists, too busy to really engage with art, and a little bit it's too much about curating. So how do you teach curating in a manner that there is not only like falling in love with yourself? And that's why in this program we try to have a topic in which we are forming a body of researchers. So we have a common horizon, we work on something together, but yet you have always, as human beings, we have a need for own creativity, own independence, and own freedom. So there is this permanent tension and push and pull and negotiation between your own freedom and how can you function as a group where you actually share something together.
That's clear. But what about these non-hegemonic approaches and practices, like transdisciplinary approaches or art beyond the white cube and gender decoloniality?
So, for example, here, this is a good example from Capellan. I mean, you know his practice, but when he was in Sweden in the 70s, he was making drawings on leaves. You see, there is like a drawing, a bit like a cave drawing, because he says that his lineage is from the cave drawings. So he was making these drawings on the leaves, and then getting these trees closer and closer to the white cube. And at the end, he said, "Okay, now I'm ready to come to the white cube." So he was like working outside and then saying, "I have this methodology of invasion and dispersion." This is his vocabulary. An exhibition is a form of momentarily, for a short period of time, of invading a space and then dispersing it. That's, you know, but I mean, it's something. It's one of the methodologies. Yeah, one of the methodologies that we try to look at, and this is the second publication.
If you as an audience want to know more about this publication, of course, we can keep the book. It's a present for Laura, but you can find it online in a PDF. It's in English, but it's quite clear to understand if you go slowly. I'm glad you had the chance to meet Capellan in person, because you were saying that this process of gathering all this information actually happened all online, but you two were at the same country, but you didn't have the chance to get together, right? And that happened.
Actually, doing a book in the pandemic is a good thing because people have time to talk to you on, you know. So that was an effect of the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, as you may know, Joanna is a co-curator from the Polish pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And, well, there we can see the front of the pavilion. I actually didn't have the opportunity to be there in person, but when I saw all these pictures, I got really impressed about the work of Malgorzata Mirgatas. And I was curious to know how this complex and delicate and powerful work managed to patch word as a word, as a verb itself, to gather methodologies, different curators, different practices and concepts. Could you tell us about how all this project happened in terms of co-curating together with another curator?
Of course. Yes, so for those who have not been to Venice, I will introduce shortly this project. So I had a big chance of being a curator, co-curator of the Polish pavilion in the last Venice Biennial together with Wojciech Szymański. And this pavilion presented Małgorzata Mirgatas, who is a Roma artist, so an artist from a Roma minority. Roma minority is the biggest European minority. So in Europe, you have 12 million people of Roma origin, which is, previously in derogatory manner called gypsy people, which should not be called like this because there was a Congress of Roma people who decided in 1970 that they don't wish for this nomination. And I know that in Latin America there is also Roma minority, and actually all across the world. But in Europe, it's actually the biggest minority. It's also something we as Europeans share because they do live in all countries of Europe. So at the moment in Poland, there is a right-wing government. So in this particular situation, it was even more striking and powerful for us that we could turn Polish pavilion into something which we would call the transnational pavilion, a pavilion that represents a Polish artist, but actually a Roma people generally on the planet too. This is the facade of the pavilion. Is in the Giardini, in the back, actually not so far from Uruguay, on the other side of the river. It's a building from 1932, a bit like the Pavilione Centrale that Cecilia was showing, a bit, Mussolini style era. Very cold, and we tried, because this is how Małgorzata works, to soften this. Generally, she's working with textile, with large-scale textiles, and this is a tarot. This is a representation of a Wheel of Fortune, which is a tarot card. So she and tarot card and telling the fortune, reading people, it's associated also with Roma culture, because actually tarot, when you look at the history of tarot, it was a game played at the court in Renaissance Italy, and with the arrival of Roma people to Europe, tarot started to be slowly used as this kind of magical tool to tell the future, or something, as one of the scholars in our book about this pavilion calls psychoanalysis before psychoanalysis. Before psychoanalysis was, I don't know what you would say about it, but before it was invented, there was always the human need, right, to tell what is your anxiety, what you are standing for. So we covered the whole pavilion, the coldness of this pavilion, with this Wheel of Fortune, which is, of course, the symbol Wheel of Fortune is like how in all our lives, one day is up and one day is down, and how life and the cycle of life goes on. Then let me show you, this is our team. So this is Małgorzata in the middle. This is Wojciech Szymański, co-curator that I didn't know before, and me on the right. We are here in this picture on the research trip in Ferrara in Italy, in the beautiful Renaissance Palazzo Schifanoia. What I want to say, because we speak about curating here, so what I want to say is that it was an interesting constellation, because Wojciech and me didn't know each other before. And it's a competition like in Uruguay for the pavilion, so I asked her to apply. He also asked her to apply, and she said, why don't two of you work together? And we didn't meet each other. We never met each other before. We are very, very different people. And this is actually, now I'm reminded of Capellan words, because we are not friends. We are still not friends. But in a way, we brought, each of us, completely different things to this equation. And she had a great instinct, because usually it's only curators who say this artist and this artist belong together, or we'll make something interesting. This is how exhibition function, right? Artists are put together if they want or not. And this is what she did with us. She put us together, and we created some kind of patchwork. And she's working with patchwork, so she extended the idea of a patchwork also to patchwork curating. And that was, sometimes painful, but actually for like the field and thinking beyond your own borders and your limits, it was really productive. This is our starting point for the pavilion. It's a beautiful Renaissance palace in Italy called Palazzo Schifanoia. And what you see here, it's a zodiac sign. So let me show you. It's an important palace for art history, because Aby Warburg was writing a lot about this. So This is the sign. This is March, sign of Aries. This is Taurus, May, Gemini, etc. And only 8 months are preserved. So the other part of the palace vanished. The whole palace was only rediscovered in the 19th century, and this is where Abi Warburg, the German Jewish historian, came there and coined something very, very crucial for art history. Something which is totally obvious for us today, but this is what he first time said it, that images are in movements. In movement, right? So something in German, Bilder, Fahrzeuge. Images are in movement. So he looked at certain motifs, especially in this astrological signs, and he said, actually this motif is not from Renaissance Italy. It has made a journey. It has traveled. It originates in India. It went to ancient Greece or to Persia. From Persia, it went to ancient Greece. From ancient Greece, it went to Renaissance Italy. So it's a bit like with fairy tales, right? We find different fairy tales in different cultures. They have traveled. In some sense, they have traveled. I'm sure here actually it's an interesting study point for this, because your ancestors have traveled, and how those stories or these fairy tales, which were versions here. So Warburg was looking at this and say, yes, images are in movement. So for us, it was also very interesting, because when he analyzes these images traveling from India or Persia, of course, social or political dimension is not there. But in this time when he analyzes this, not only images travel, also people travel. And Roma people start to exit India and make a huge journey to Europe. So for us, it was also interesting how to reread art history and this kind of canonical palace of art history through this very, tangible, palpable lens of Roma existence in Europe today.
Joanna, before you move into the next picture, I think it could be interesting if you could tell us about how, with this practice of patchworking and the time that takes to make each piece, how is time itself involving here in relation with the speed that we now these days are used to? Each image takes a second, because these are important constructions that for the artist would take, well, I don't know exactly how much time took her. Yeah, 5 months. So
answer your question, I will actually move to the next. It's okay for you. So because this is to show you what has been done, right? This is the original month of March in the pavilion on the left side, and this is how Małgorzata has reread this month of March. So it's a very meticulous and precise and very, very laborious process of making this kind of a quilt / patchwork from bits and pieces of secondhand clothing. So actually all of it comes from secondhand clothing, except for pieces of some of the family members. So for example, this is Małgorzata, and this is her mother. To depict her mother, she takes a piece of cloth of her mother, because our clothes are carrying our energy. So also, she's what she calls throwing material into the painting. So she has a dialogue with her mother, and her mother is saying, now, like, because of her work, her mother is saying, "Do you want this? Shall I give it to someone, or do you want it for the painting?" Because she's like taking piece of clothing to give energy to these things. But it's a very laborious and a precise. She's also a craft woman, right? And this, of course, refers also, when we read about what is a patchwork, on what is a collage. If you read in art history books today, you will read that this is something that Georges Braque invented, or Pablo Picasso, which is absolutely not true. And this is also what she's dealing with, because this kind of activities, it's a centuries-old activity, community-oriented, very often made by women. It's just at one point was written down in art history as big man invention. So this is also part of this time. It's not about only achieving this one artwork. It's about looking at the dimension of making it as a community through time. How, dealing with time, sitting, and just doing it as your way of living life. So this is also, she is referring to this. So as you see, we kept this middle belt. This is always like kept, the zodiac sign. Those are deities, so like different mysterious figures, and she replaced them with what she calls her own goddesses, her own stars. So people who have led her in her life, and those are very often other Roma women, other Roma activists, other Roma artists. In this case, this is Alfreda Markowska, who is a Holocaust survivor, and she saved a lot of Roma children during the Second World War. And this is her grandmother, and this is her sister. So in every of these 12 months, you find some star of Małgorzata there. Here, this is an ancient Greek mythology. So this is Minerva entering a scene of Greek mythology. It's replaced. It was also shown in Documenta. Maybe some of you have seen. It's replaced with the journey of Roma people to Europe, which is an art historical material of Jacques Callot, very often derogatory, very anti-gypsy, which she is taking as an important material because it's one of the very few art historical materials, but she's changing the temperature and the reading of it. So it's something which we called from cultural appropriation. She considers that this is, appropriating culture to culture appreciation. It's kind of reading, metamorphosing this art historical reading, and those are this is every day at the court in Ferrara, replaced by every day in the Czarna Góra, a village where she grew up and she's living. This is ego-oriented, duke-oriented, this is community-oriented. So this is kind of a translation, we try to do, and this is our studio. Yeah,
that's really amazing.
It's a beautiful studio we had in the hotel called Imperial by accident. Imperial. Speaking of the colonization, a pretty interesting situation. All these materials are from secondhand, kilograms of secondhand clothes from different shops in Tatra Mountains, where she lives. It's at the border with Slovakia, southern Poland. It's also interesting to say that we could use curtains, or because this hotel was going into renovation, so we could use curtains or bed linens from this hotel. So it was like a decolonial acupuncture, because she would take, all the curtains were green. So if you saw in Documenta, this upper belt, all the green trees in her installation are the curtains from this Hotel Imperial. It's like, taking a Hotel Imperial and cutting it into pieces. It's also her methodology. This is Małgorzata, so this is how first she makes a small drawing, that it's augmented, that is put on the paper. Those are 4 collaborators. So speaking of time, also, there was a competition. We won this competition we found out in October 21. So it's 6 months, 6 months to the opening of Venice Biennial. So actually it was day and night work. I mean, not night, but like really, every day, 5 months work, which is interesting because once you have a concept, it's just about making it happen. And also the whole conceptual part, thinking about it, happened for the proposal. And then you just have to make it happen, which is usually not like we work, right? We always do this parallel, but this was like separate.
Joanna, now that we just saw this huge picture with all those clothes on the floor, and the fact that you mentioned that curtains were reused for patchworking this artwork, I was wondering if, besides gathering the energy from those people who wore those clothes, was it an important issue, the repurposing thing? I presume it has to do somehow with the gypsy tradition of reusing things, but now that we are all around the world worried about environmental issues, how this theme, in which sense it was a powerful thing in the conceptual piece of art in this case?
Yes, so yeah, it's an important question because, of course, we should all rethink, how we do things and what materials we use and what does it mean. But in some sense, I believe, if she has always been a very respectful person towards nature and others, so it has always been part of her thinking about art that the material she likes is not 20 kilograms of metal, but it's a cardboard or carton, for example, or this second-hand clothes. So it's not thinking like, okay, now I have to, which is also important. Maybe we should all change, but it has always been in her. We call this pavilion Re-Enchanting the World, like one of the chapters of Cecilia Biennial. Also, it's called Re-Enchanting the World. Re-Enchanting the World is from Silvia Federici book about how should we rethink our relationship, with planets and sea and ourselves, etc., like through feminist community-oriented thinking. So, in some sense, it has always been there. It has always been part of this non-violent relation with others. Non-violent relation means also we respect material and we use it again, right? Or we give it another life. And Warburg speaks about this concept in German, Nachleben, life after life of images, because they travel. And in this case, on material level, it's life after life of the materials, because they have another life. And actually, when you think about these materials, they also came from India or Bangladesh. So they also made this kind of journey, like Roma people. So there is this another level of this, what is life after life of materials here. This is the pavilion. So those are like their March, April, etc. 12 months. So we completed the Palazzo Schifanoia, which only has 8 months.
Joanna, I was wondering if, for this project in particular, you co-curated with another curator.
Yeah.
But with this curating beyond mainstream, how were the figures in the game, to call it in a way, where there are two curators and an artist, and it's the artist who have decided who was the one who will curate the project for her, in a way to say. But how, my question relates a little bit more about when the curator moves from the focal point as an important figure in the project, how much room there's for the artist to present his work, and how much from the curator's side decide, how are those levels organized in this new way to curate?
I mean, like this is, of course, the mainstream. This is the Venice Biennial. But within this, how can you, within given circumstances, rethink certain conditions? Because, of course, Venice Biennial is such an old school institution, like national pavilions and self-representation. This is from 19th century. No other biennial on the planet is doing this, right? So how can you, within this given format, still rethink it? And I think this transnational, which will happen maybe one day, that there won't be any more pavilions, or they will be done differently, and they are done differently, like artists from different countries invite each other, etc. So also we try to play with this, and it's in some sense transnational, because, for example, among these different stars and people that led her in her life, there are people from so many cultures. And when I had my Swedish colleagues, for example, coming, they saw very important Roma Swedish activists. So they entered there and they saw part of themselves. They found part of themselves. So I think this is important. I mean, no situation is ideal. How within this situation you think out of the box? How you are trying within this situation to push a little bit what is the hegemonic order in there?
I think there was the other day when we got together. You mentioned a little bit how was the process of selecting the project itself, and I think it will be interesting to share it with the audience. The fact that you have to present an envelope with a project and it's anonymous. Do you mind telling us about that story?
Sure. So in Poland, actually now, as I said, there is a right-wing government, but not everything yet was changed. So one thing that has not been changed is the fact that since 20-something years, there is this very democratic competition for the pavilion, which actually makes almost every Polish pavilion a very good one, because every professional in the country can apply. But in order to, I mean, we are all, small circles, and it's a big thing to curate the pavilion. So actually, only the artist's name is known. So you present a proposal, what the artist is proposing, and then the curator names are put in the second envelope, and you have how you say it? Not password, but like a code name on this other envelope. So we used the Roma word called Bacht, which means luck, good luck, So that was our name of this on this other envelope, and she said yes, of course, it worked,
Yeah, it really brought you luck. I don't know if anyone here has a question in relation with the pavilion. If not, otherwise we move to another interesting project that Joanna has participated as an interdependent curator. Has anyone has a question in relation with the pavilion?
Maybe, yeah. Because we want to show one more project which is a bit different. So if you have some comment or question about the pavilion.
Si alguien tiene una pregunta respecto al lo que fue el pabellón, si no, nos movemos al próximo proyecto.
Hello. So you cannot, in Poland, you cannot have a curator from another country who is a Polish artist, or is it
No,
something
you can.
that
Everyone can apply, but the proposal has to be done in Polish.
Okay. But I mean, you can be a curator from Israel and with a Polish artist.
I mean, actually,
something has to be Polish, I guess. No?
Well, yeah, I mean, there has to be some relevance to Poland,
Yeah.
right? But there was in 2011, maybe you remember, like a very great piece in Polish pavilion of Yael Bartana, Israeli artist, who is dealing with the Polish curator.
Okay.
But it was very important she was in the Polish pavilion because her project was about this imaginary plan of 3 million Jewish people returning to Poland.
Okay.
That there is a void and, missing limb in Polish history and culture. And there is this kind of imaginary thing that there is a character that calls for these 3 million people to return. It was called Jewish Renaissance Movement in Poland. And it was really announcing, in a way, today there are so many Jewish activists working with this, but 10 years ago, not yet. It was almost like subconsciously announcing certain need for this Jewish Renaissance in Poland. So, if there is then there at one point in 2017, I think there was Sharon Lockhart, US artist, and that was like related a bit to Poland, but I think not really, So, sure, there can be non-Polish artist or curator, but needs to have some relevance.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Other question?
This is a month of January, and those are on the right side, these two Swedish activists, Roma activists that I spoke about, Rosa Taikon and Katarina Taikon. They changed the legislation in Sweden for Roma people who actually till the 60s could stay in one place only 2 weeks. So they had to travel, and then through their activism, they had the right to settle.
So I just want to see if I understood. In a way, your role then was to extract from...
Can you speak closer?
Extract from the artist the essence of her theme, or do you sort of take a jumble of things and turn it into a theme? How does that?
No, this is this is really like what we can say curatorial concept. This whole thing, because it's a common work of an artist who does this amazing patchworks and tapestries and different motifs, and us as curators who try to find like a theme together, a way that these different motifs, because she always has worked with everyday life. She always have worked with her stories, with Roma women and emancipation and empowerment, and this historical material. So we found a palazzo, like an architecture and a reference in art history to give shape, to a concept together.
Sort of turn it into a story then.
Yes, give it a story. I mean, there is always a story in each of it, but meta story, right? Put
Yeah.
it together.
Thanks.
No more questions about this one? Then I think it will be worth it to move into the next project where, Joanna, she has a very active role as an intercurator in the public domain. And there's this particular project that I think if we manage to unfold it, the main concept will give us the chance to get closer to those really beyond mainstream issues that we are all curious to know a little bit about. Yeah, you tell us about this.
Yeah, that was really beyond mainstream, because that was a pandemic project, something we all share on the planet, right? The pandemic situation. And I live in Berlin, where many artists per square meters live. And curators. And I met together with a Turkish curator, Ovul Durmuzoglu, a friend of mine, in the park when the pandemic happened. And then we were thinking, like we were talking, about the fact that actually, out of the sudden in Berlin, we are all there. All these artists are there because usually they are traveling, everyone is busy. We are all there. And also, as you remember, maybe here was the same. At the beginning of the pandemic, the museums were like, oh, let's do another digital program, another Zoom talk. And we're thinking, no, actually, how can we be analog in the pandemic? And how can we try to see if art makes sense, gives us some kind of language of overcoming this isolation that we are at home? So we started to write letters to our neighbors who are artists, both like my friends, but also then other art, like word of mouth. Like we started to think who is another artist living here, another artist, and ask them to exhibit in the windows and balconies. So just be at home and put something which is like a Morse signal, right? Like a exhibition in your window, basically about the pandemic. So this is a beautiful piece of David Rich, untitled, after Perfect Lovers of Felix Gonzalez Torres, his piece about AIDS and another pandemic, and with his lover, two clocks going out of sync. But in this case, there is no more, this quick tempo. This is our second edition. We did 2 editions of the Balcone because we were in the pandemic, 3 years. The second edition. So this is a time under pandemic, like hours, going slow, and it has. We had like I think 50 or 60 artists, and it was really like a local initiative in our district, Prenzlauer Berg, in East Berlin. But it was picked up by BBC or some other actually news channels all around the world, and it started to have the local editions. Like in Santiago de Chile, there was an edition. In India, in Taiwan, in Paris. So in a way, it really, people started to write to us. It was like a necessity, like art as a necessity a little bit. And we understood that actually that it was so transcultural because this idea of being a neighbor is like planetary. You're a neighbor everywhere, right? A neighbor wherever you go. So it's this is what made this project, on one hand, very local in our district, but also very global. So I just show you one more example. This is a piece on the left side of Antonia Lowe. And this is on the right side by Elke Boer on Kavara. So she started to like copy on Kavara messages in the window. And it was pretty beautiful because it was really in the hardcore time that only 1 or 2 people, you could only walk with your family in the street. So it was great to see through the balcony, like all these other people walking. You cannot really talk, but you see them, you see them going around and trying to find those balconies and those windows and like be analog.
Joanna, there was any map or guideline to follow? How did people manage to walk around and find besides looking? I mean, there was anything to guide them?
Yeah, I mean, it was a project, a simple project, but also pushed curating beyond mainstream topics because, for example, we had to do some kind of a map, but we realized very quickly that we cannot like just publish in the internet 50 addresses of the artists, right? Because I mean, it's impossible. And especially famous artists, some of them are our neighbors. So we then we decided we have to, like, if we do this cartography, we cannot write that on this street is Yael Bartana and on this street is somebody else. So we just put dots where those approximate dots. So it's not like in GPS that you get like a super exact, approximate. So you go somewhere and now you have to make an effort to look around, approximate dot, and then a list of people, but without saying who is who. So also there was no, like as if you were going here in the fair and there will be no names of artists and you have to decide how you feel about the work. So there was no hierarchy also in name dropping. It was it was a group of people who did this exhibition and this group of dots.
In a way, would you say that this project also changed the speed that people enjoy the neighborhood because they have to be present and they have to observe with almost no people. I presume there must have been a big challenge to create public art in public space with no public, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's what is public art, right? It doesn't have to be only a sculpture which is in the middle of the park, right? The public art can be a way of how strangers communicate with each other. This is also one of the definition of the public sphere, that we are together, we don't know each other, but now we are here, we're sharing this because, we are interested maybe in something what I have to say. So it's a relation between strangers. And art is also actually a beautiful tool to make this relation between strangers powerful and give meaning and signals and metaphors and to how we feel at this moment of confinement, because it was all made from the private sphere, from your window, from your balcony, out to the public. So sending signals, right? So as you said the other day, maybe somebody didn't know about this project, but then you start to see like one thing here and one thing here, and then maybe you also change the way of looking at this architecture and things around you. So that was switch off the GPS, basically.
Exactly. And but what could you tell us about these sort of new spaces that we could call it no wall spaces that are created, for instance, in this project by having one project here, another project there? There's a certain area that we mark without marking it with walls or with any path. Just by discovering you get to know that you are getting close to an area that starts to feel different. There's another tension, there's another type of visitors. How do you know you are outside those spaces?
How do you know that when people play a ball, there is like a space that is marked by this ball, right? Because this ball is a tension between these two people who can stand far away. So it's similar. This different marks in the public space, they create some kind of net out of their existence. And they create this space between the walls or without walls.
Do you think it's well, as you mentioned, this project was extended to other countries, but during that period of the lockdown, do you think it would be fair to now create it and extend it to other countries without that context?
I mean, this is really a project out of necessity. And I think it's good for art to be created out of necessity. So we did it like first edition 2020. Then we couldn't believe it, but like 1 year later, we were in the same situation. So we created again this edition. And then 2022, I mean, first of all, I was working on Venice, but also it felt like now everyone is traveling. So there was no need, it would be forced to make another edition at that moment. But who knows what happens, Maybe there will be another necessity of this project.
We hope not the same one. Joanna, sometimes we find you as a curator, an independent curator, and sometimes we find you as an interdependent curator.
Yeah.
Extend that.
No,
because
I'm
it's
saying, I started actually, a student of mine said once, Carlota Mir is her name, from Spain. She said, I'm independent curator, but actually, by this independent, I'm so dependent. And it's true, like also it's very true for the artists, because usually artists don't have like a job, or other kind of job. But so when you're independent, you are so dependent because you are dependent on, sales and people decisions and invitations and so much dependency in your independence. So I think it's good to borrow this interdependent concept for like thinkers like Haraway or Silvia Federici and say, actually, we are interdependent as human beings. So as a curators, we can also be interdependent. So now I'm calling myself interdependent curator.
There's another question here that we need to ask it. Joanna, what about the founds? Because when you are an independent curator, it's one thing. When you are an interdependent, from where these founds come? Do you apply to specific programs, or how that works?
You know, sometimes you work like in Venice, you work with big budget and you deal with these big numbers, and sometimes you work with zero, like in the Balcone, but you have a need to do this. And I think it's good and important to be open for both. You know, that you know when there's conditions, you have to be demanding about these conditions and fair, but you have to be also open just to do something because it makes sense. And so I just live like this.
Thank you very much. Let's see if people have any questions about this project or any other thing that we spoke this evening.
I have a new question. Now, come back for the at the beginning when you started to say about curating with friends of friends, and I mean, I'm an artist, but I also do curate projects, and what I recently started to do is trying to curate something with artists I don't know. I don't want to curate with friends, and I think it's a good way to oblige yourself to the same as people now are trying to curate only women or only trying not to only have like 50% of 50% because it's a new way to do. And I think as a curator, it's always a big challenge, no, to find ways to spot what you have to do and what you don't have to do. So it's hard to do a project now with only men, for example, or only friends, or only men friends, or whatever. And I think what's your position towards curating in with this kind of obligations in a way that the society or the context or the I mean the market gives you in a way, because it can be also about market and economy and galleries, and but I'm taking your sentence about friends and known ones and stuff like this. Yeah.
I mean, you know, as a curator, most of the people we work with are not friends. I mean, they might become friends, which is great,
Yeah.
but I guess you need to push yourself to think, you know, beyond already your circle if you really want to do curating. It's impossible to just do this with the friends. It's, you know, this is Carlos was saying this because very often he was saying this about him as an artist, that artists who are mostly artists but sometimes curators, they tend to work only with friends. You know, because you just do this out for another project. And as a, let's say, like more, I'm not an artist, I'm a curator, so I do one curatorial project after another. So of course I'm working 99% with non-friends, no friends. But there has to be something which Carlos Capelan said, clarity of intentions. Yeah, I have to trust the person I'm inviting, that the direction we are going into is something we both wish. And of course, we can surprise each other, but this clarity of intention, the trusting of an intention, this is the most important. It's much more important than friendship. And about quotas, and, you know, it's about conversations which are in the air. It's about conversations of our times. It's not about like quota now that women, it's just important to acknowledge that all these years, you know, men were dominant in every sphere, and it's important to, like what also Cecilia did, she's not making like a big fuss about it, about the fact that 80% of participants or 90 were women, but it's the thing to do, especially when you do a Venice biennial. So it's not limit yourself, but think like, how does this reflect a conversation of our time? I think I would say this.
I felt that Joanna have like a confidence in that the small things can be big things, can be maximum effects, something like that. It's about trust.
But you know, it's like feminist slogan of second wave. The personal is political. So I guess in many artworks, it's very important that there is some kind of deeper relevance for you. But actually, as a curator, I'm also interested that there is a relevance not only for this person. So when I'm like looking at an artwork, of course, if somebody had a heartbreak, it's fine. But I would like on the top of the heartbreak, also see some other relevance for the society. So I'm looking for this. I'm looking for this honesty in your private, in your personal, in your motivation, what drives you, which emotion. But I'm looking for a conversation inside the society, right? And Małgorzata, in the Polish pavilion, this is an artist that really has it all, what at the moment is important, I think, in art. She has this very personal story. She has a story of like overcoming the oppression of the Roma minority, but in an affirmative way, in like community way, and showing other women who have been examples for her. And it's so important also politically. But it cannot be only important politically. It's not only about big topics. It's also about her everyday existence and vernacular cultures. So it's, you know, just important to be honest, but think of a larger picture.
We saw that. Yeah. Thank you.
Hola, me interesaría saber el tiempo necesario para generar esa metodología de confianza y de borde para generar un proyecto. ¿Cómo juega la categoría tiempo, digamos, en esas propuestas? Porque en estos proyectos generalmente comisionados o pedidos es muy poco, por lo menos acá en Uruguay con los que se cuenta. Y bueno, ¿cómo se maneja eso para generar una relación de esa confianza como para poder trabajar juntos?
I think I
Oh, you got it?
I think so. Yeah. I guess, you know, I guess it's, you know, when the idea is good, you know, we know it. I think, you know, when you think something is deeper about, like Di Balcone. We met in the park with Ovul. We knew that it's something to do something now in the balconies and windows. This project happened 10 days later. You know, it just happened like this because we knew that was important to do it right now, and time was the dimension. We couldn't like now raise a budget and let's do it in 3 months in comfortable situation. No way. I mean, it had to be done now, like give birth to this now, because it made sense. But of course, when you do a large scale project like Venice Biennale, the time, of course, is also important to think through this deeper, to research it, to read books, and to make a good concept. So it's about this, confidence in a good idea. It's not every day that we have good ideas, but when it's there, you have to cherish it and think, okay, what are the right conditions for this idea? Maybe this idea just needs 1 week, and another idea needs 2 years. Just, you know, work with this. I guess, I mean, I understood like 70% of the question, but is it a good right answer?
I think we got pretty close. Alejandra, ¿te referís al tiempo de confianza en relación al curador trabajando con un artista o confianza en el proyecto?
En realidad, el tiempo que se necesita para generar una confianza en otro ser humano, ¿no? Como para poder abrir tu proyecto y para poder intercambiar las ideas.
Well, what you explained was pretty close and important for us, but her question, it's more related to trust as an important line in this curating beyond mainstream, as you mentioned before. So sometimes time issue runs so fast that how do you manage this time thing when you have a short period and you have to make a certain connection with the artist when this is such an important thing? Just do it.
I mean, you know, like sometimes you need 5 minutes for good connection. I mean, this is in life, you know, you connect, but like on the intellectual, artistic level, you know, but like on.
Probably she refers if there's any process that you go through in order to know if it will work or if you can make it happen. Just life. La vida misma.
Yeah, being honest. If you feel that there is a good idea that can be matured, just follow this idea. Follow it. Be consequent, and of course, what I am saying also to my students, every day work on it a little bit, because of course the idea is one thing, and then you have to make it happen. And so every day, little step.
Would you say that somehow this has to do with the non-hegemonic practices? More like feeling
It has to
things,
do with
yeah.
passion, discipline, and everyday work.
Exactly.
Just to complement or follow through what Guadalupe, I don't know which artist said, but I think there's something in there that art is like the maximum effort for the minimal result. It's like you don't know what is more important. Sometimes it's not, sorry, it's not measurable how it will affect a people, a person, and a spectator. How do you know how do you feel really when you, after a show, you feel that you said that, like, you feel that a project was successful. You said that we need to do this now, not with more money. How do you know afterwards? Okay, this made sense.
Well, it comes back to you, it comes back to you because you see if that made sense for people or not. So and this is exactly being a curator, to have this kind of instinct of how to deliver what and when. And partly you can learn it, obviously, but partly I guess it's also kind of instinct, that you are this middle woman between an artist and larger audiences. So that's why there is not one formula that trust needs 2 months and a half. It's one sometimes needs 1 day, and sometimes needs 1 year, and sometimes there is no friendship, and sometimes it's just it's believing your instinct, but also working hard and understanding which kind of meaning it creates, and how can it also relate to other concerns of society. So how there's so many great activists doing amazing work about topics very often artists deal with. How those things can be connected without that activists feel offended by symbolism of art. I believe it can be connected, like in the pavilion. So many Roma people came there. They were so proud of it. It really gave them belief in what they do on the everyday basis as an activist. So how the symbolic and the tedious, important work of activism can be connected. So this is also my job. I'm as a curator, I'm a little bit like, as I said with my colleague Nora Steinfeld, a bit a policewoman, a bit activist. So there is always you're siding on hegemony side because you are in these machines, if you're working in this context, but you want to also deliver certain ideas which push thinking out of the box.
A personal question: when and how did you realize you wanted to be a curator?
So I am a failed theater director. Since I was a child, I wanted to be a theater director. And I was like going to theater classes, and then finally I was at the Theater Academy in Warsaw in Poland, and then I discovered conceptual art. And then I felt like, no, it's impossible now to do emotions on the stage, so then I moved to slowly, it took some years, but moved to art. But maybe one day I will still go back to theater.
Joanna, I presume as a curator, you need to make a certain plan for whatever you will do. And I was wondering, how much room do you leave for unexpected issues?
If you work in the public sphere, public space, it's one of your categories you work with. Contingency, the unexpected. And I actually enjoyed it very much. So not everyone enjoys it, but I enjoy people coming and saying, what is it? Is this art? And then you have to explain, but I like it. I like it because I feel like art is an important language, and actually I like to speak about with somebody else why it's important. And accidents or misunderstandings are part of it.
Probably an opportunity to get in contact.
It is also, it's important in the work of a curator to be affirmative. If you are a pessimist curator, it's hard, I think. You need to be affirmative. That somehow it makes sense, because you are have to back up artists, but you have to also back up audience,
When you talk about accidents and misunderstandings, I remember I wasn't there, but of course all of us we read about the problem in Documenta, that it was a major problem, and I was wondering if this situation, particular in racism and anti-Semitism, that it was. Which is your approach to this kind of situations in terms of curatorial, in terms of institutional, and also the most important in terms of the public, the audiences, and the artists who were touched by this, all the artists what were touched by this, not only the ones who pass directly by this, but the other artists who were working at the Documenta too.
Thank you for this question. I have tried to reflect on it. I wrote an essay in a Swedish magazine called Paletten about this role of a curator. Because, of course, on one hand, we want to push what is the curation, what is the curatorial. So Ruan Grupa has pushed it very much. Because at the press conference, as curators, they said, this exhibition, Documenta, the most important exhibition in the world, this is going to be a surprise for you, the audience, as much as it is for us, the curators. It's a surprise. You know, they didn't know they know like 20% what is in the exhibition. It was their statement. It was great if no accident would have happened. Because when an accident happens, of course, then you interrogate the fact that actually curator needs to have a responsibility. You have to know what you're working on. There has to be this trust in the intentions, right? Because otherwise, if you don't take this responsibility, and it's a big organization, you actually put this responsibility on your intern or somebody else in the organization, and it's a mess. So I think curating has to be pushed and rethought, but there are, for me, two like unreducible aspects of curating. And one is responsibility, another is visual literacy. To a degree, visual literacy, that you kind of have an understanding of sorts of what visually can something mean, which affects this image can have in the world. So I'm siding with them. I believed in this exhibition, but I think they failed on this point.
But after this, because this is what happened, probably many of us think it was a mistake, it was a naivete, or probably a provocation. They also want to put inside the main spot of contemporary art theory discussion and everything. But after what happened, what do you think it could be better have done for solving or saving the rest of the exhibition, the rest of the artists and the audiences that were there waiting for 5 years more to reflect on this kind of
for
situations?
example, what could have been done is that, you know, in these moments of scandal, there is a need for discussion, right? People want to come and discuss this. And Lumbung was thought as a place of discussion and discourse. The main idea of Documenta was this Indonesian word Lumbung, a rice barn, where people come and exchange. It's not about art, but making friends. Oh, speaking of making friends. Make friends, not art, was the slogan. Make friends, not art. So in this moment, actually, Lumbung, for me, should have worked much better. It didn't work, and they should have taken responsibility for this Lumbung. So help it a little bit. It will not happen like this because it's a scandal. And in the scandal, you need to take a position. So unfortunately, who took a position? German press, very strong position. So terrible, terrible articles, terrible shaming, blah, 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 anti-Semitic exhibition. And they didn't speak. And when you don't speak, when you're silent, of course, the content is made for you. So you have to speak as a curator. You just have to. It's a bit like, if a politician doesn't say anything, of course, then it's made for you. So I think this is what could have happened differently. But at the end, it was also a great show.
Experience. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Joanna, it was a big pleasure to be in conversation with you, and we hope to have you soon again back in the country.
Yeah, I wish. It would be great. Thank you, Adriana, so much for the